Imagine a city so consumed by violence that the only person you feel you can trust is the man shouting at you from your TV screen. He's not just a journalist, he's a savior. He arrives at crime scenes before the police do. He shows you the raw, unfiltered truth. And he promises to clean up the streets with a bullet if necessary. But what if I told you that the hero was actually the villain? What if the man reporting the murders was the one signing the death warrants? This isn't the plot of a dystopian movie. This is the alleged reality of Wallace Souza, a Brazilian television host and politician who was accused of turning the Amazon into his own personal hunting ground. The accusation was simple but terrifying. Authorities claimed he wasn't just covering crime, they said he was manufacturing it. Ordering executions to generate content, boost his ratings, and eliminate his competition in the drug trade. For years, this story has been told as a simple case of a media monster. But the truth is far more complex. It involves a legal system designed to protect the powerful, a police force at war with itself, and a legacy that refuses to die. We need to look beyond the headlines, because as of 2025, new legal rulings have completely rewritten the ending of this story. So ask yourself one question before we begin. How far would someone go to be the most famous person in the room? To understand how this happened, you have to understand the stage where it played out. Manaus is not like any other city. It is a metropolis of 2 million people carved out of the dense Amazon rainforest. It is a place of incredible beauty, but it is also a critical logistics hub for the global drug trade. Cocaine flows down the river like water, and violence often follows in its wake. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, the people of Manaus were living in fear, and into that fear stepped Wallace Souza. He was a former police officer who had been kicked off the force years earlier for pension fraud. But he didn't let that stop him. He reinvented himself as a crusader for justice. He launched a TV show called Canal Livre, and if you've never seen it, it is almost impossible to describe. Picture a chaotic variety show. On one side of the stage, you have scantily clad dancers and bad cover bands. You have a puppet named Galerito making crude jokes and fighting with guests. And then, in a jarring split second, the camera cuts to a bleeding corpse on the street. This was the formula: extreme entertainment mixed with extreme violence. It was designed to shock you. It was designed to keep your eyes glued to the screen. And it worked. Canal Livre became a ratings juggernaut. Everyone watched it. Families watched it over lunch. Souza positioned himself as the only man brave enough to show the truth. He would scream at the camera, berating the police for their incompetence. He would interview grieving mothers and promise them vengeance. But there was something strange about his coverage. His team was fast, suspiciously fast. They were often filming the bodies while the smoke was still rising. Sometimes they were there before the ambulance even left the garage. For the audience, this was proof of his dedication. He was a superhero with a microphone. But for the police trying to do their jobs, it was starting to look like something else entirely. It looked like inside information. Success on television was just the first step. Souza knew that in Brazil, real power doesn't come from ratings. It comes from holding office. He used his massive popularity to launch a political career. He ran for the state assembly and won. And he didn't just win, he received more votes than anyone else in the state. This wasn't just about ego, this was about survival. In Brazil, elected officials enjoy something called Parliamentary Immunity. It is a legal shield that makes it incredibly difficult to arrest them. Unless they are caught in the literal act of a crime, they are protected from the lower courts. They can only be tried by a higher tribunal. For a man with enemies, this was the ultimate insurance policy. Think of it like the arsonist fire chief. Imagine a fire chief who is a hero because he always puts out the fires first. The town loves him, they give him more budget, they elect him mayor. But secretly, he is the one lighting the matches.
He creates the problem so he can be the only one to solve it. And because he runs the department, no one can investigate him. This is the power Souza allegedly held. He was the lawmaker and the lawbreaker. He sat in the assembly, railing against drug gangs, while allegedly using his own death squad to take out his rivals in the underworld. He created a state of exception. He convinced the public that the city was a war zone and that normal rules didn't apply. He argued that the only way to fight monsters was to become a bigger monster. And the people cheered for it. They didn't care about due process, they wanted results. And Souza gave them results, delivered in high definition every single day. But there is a danger in playing both sides. Eventually, you make a mistake. Eventually, you get sloppy. And for Wallace Souza, the cracks began to show in 2008.
There is one specific broadcast that haunts this entire case. It is the moment where the illusion flickered. A reporter from Canal Livre is trekking through a patch of dense jungle. The camera is shaking, the music is dramatic. They emerge into a clearing and find a body. It is a man, and he has been burned alive. The fire is fresh. You can actually see the smoke still curling off the remains. The reporter turns to the camera. He covers his nose with his shirt, and he makes a comment that is truly chilling. He says, "It smells like a barbecue." But then he starts giving details. He mentions the victim's gender. He mentions the time of death. He mentions that gasoline was used. Here is the problem. The police haven't arrived yet. Forensics haven't touched the scene. The body is charred beyond recognition. Visually, you couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman. So how did the reporter know? How did he have these specific details seconds after stumbling upon the scene? The official explanation was always vague. They claimed they had sources. They claimed they monitored police scanners. But investigators began to suspect the source was the killer himself. This wasn't just journalism anymore. This looked like a victory lap. It looked like they were broadcasting a trophy. And this wasn't an isolated incident. There were reports of camera crews arriving at shootings while the gunmen were still fleeing. There were rumors of the show's producers calling in tips about crimes that hadn't happened yet. It was the Cobra effect in action. When you pay people to find snakes, they start breeding them. When you reward a TV show for filming murders and their livelihood depends on it, the incentive to manufacture violence becomes overwhelming. But suspicion isn't proof. The police needed more than just coincidence. They needed an insider. They needed someone to break the code of silence. And in October 2008, they finally got their man.
His name was Moacir Jorge da Costa, but everyone in the underworld knew him as Moa. He was an ex-military police officer. He was tough, loyal, and dangerous, and he was Wallace Souza's head of security. Moa was arrested on separate homicide charges. He was sitting in a jail cell, facing a long time behind bars. The police squeezed him. They offered him a choice: go down alone or give up the boss. Moa chose to talk, and what he said exploded the investigation. He claimed that he wasn't just a bodyguard. He claimed he was part of a hit squad, a group tasked with cleaning up the city on Souza's orders. He described a meeting where Souza allegedly gave specific instructions. He said the order was to create chaos, to barbarize the city, to make the violence so visible that the government would look incompetent. Moa admitted to committing murders that were later featured on the show. He connected the dots directly. He said the burning body in the woods was his handiwork, done to eliminate a rival trafficker. This was the smoking gun. But Souza fought back. He went on his show and denied everything. He looked straight into the camera and said he had never even met Moa. He claimed it was a political setup. He said Moa was a liar who was being tortured by corrupt police to frame an innocent man. It was a classic defense: deny, attack, reverse victim and offender. But then the photos leaked. Pictures of Wallace Souza and Moa hanging out by a swimming pool, relaxing, smiling, like old friends. The narrative shifted. The public hero was looking more like a crime boss. With Moa's testimony and the photos, the state finally had enough to act. But they still couldn't arrest Wallace. His immunity protected him. So they went after the next best thing, his son. Raphael Souza did not have immunity. He lived in his father's house. So the police obtained a warrant for Raphael, which allowed them to legally raid the Souza compound. What they found inside looked less like a politician's home and more like a cartel safe house. They found a massive stash of cash, over $150,000 hidden away. In a country with extreme poverty, that is a staggering amount of liquid money. They found an arsenal, high-caliber weapons, the kind of guns used for war, not for home defense. And they found ammunition, lots of it. But the most damning piece of evidence was a simple piece of paper. It was found in Raphael's bedroom. It was a handwritten list, just names. When police ran the names, a chilling pattern emerged. Several of the people on that list were already dead. They had been executed in recent months. It looked, for all the world, like a hit list. The police argued this was proof of an organized extermination group. They claimed the Souzas were running a militia, a paramilitary group that controls territory through fear and violence. Raphael was arrested. The images of him being led away in handcuffs were broadcast across the nation. Wallace was devastated. He appeared on television, weeping for his son. He claimed the money was for construction. He claimed the guns belonged to his security. He claimed the list was just notes for a lawyer. But the walls were closing in. The evidence was physical now. It wasn't just stories anymore. The pressure on the Legislative Assembly became unbearable. His fellow politicians could no longer protect him. The man who had been the most popular vote-getter was now toxic. The shield was about to fall.
In October 2009, the inevitable finally happened. The Legislative Assembly voted to expel Wallace Souza. In that moment, his parliamentary immunity evaporated. He was just a regular citizen again, and that meant he could be arrested. A warrant was issued immediately. But Wallace didn't wait for the handcuffs. He vanished. For 4 days, the most famous face in Manaus was a ghost. The police launched a massive manhunt. They set up roadblocks. They monitored the airports and the river ports. The city was on lockdown. It was the season finale of his own reality show, but this time he wasn't the host. He was the fugitive. Eventually, he surrendered. He emerged from hiding, looking pale and defeated. He was taken into custody, but he would never see the inside of a prison cell for very long. Wallace was a sick man. He suffered from a rare liver disease called Budd-Chiari syndrome. The stress of the investigation and the collapse of his empire accelerated his condition. He spent his final days under police guard in a hospital in Sao Paulo. He died in July 2010. He took his secrets to the grave. He was never convicted of murder. He never stood trial for the killings. This left a massive void in the story. Because he died an innocent man in the eyes of the law, his supporters could always claim it was a conspiracy. They could argue that the state killed him with stress and false accusations. But the story didn't end with his death. In fact, the violence was just getting started. The vacuum he left behind in the underworld triggered a brutal war for control. And the witnesses who testified against him, they weren't safe either. The prison system in Manaus is notoriously controlled by gangs, and Moa, the man who started it all, was sitting right in the middle of it.
Fast forward to January 1st, 2017. A riot erupts at the prison complex in Manaus. It is a massacre. Rival factions clash with medieval brutality. Dozens of inmates are killed. Many are beheaded. Among the dead was Moa. He was burned to death in his cell. The primary witness against the Souza family was eliminated in the chaos. His death meant that his testimony could never be cross-examined in a future trial. This had huge legal implications. Without Moa and without Wallace, the cases against the remaining family members began to fall apart. We have to look at the recent developments. As of 2025, the legal tide has turned completely. In May 2025, a judge ruled that Raphael Souza would not face a jury for one of the key homicide cases. The court cited a lack of robust evidence. Why was the evidence not robust? Because the witnesses were dead, or they had recanted, or the physical evidence was deemed circumstantial. Other charges against Wallace's brothers were also dismissed in 2021 and 2022. The empire has effectively struck back. And not just in court. The show itself has returned. Wallace's son, Wallace Souza, now hosts a program called Canal Livre. It looks and feels just like the old show. It has the same logo. It has the same aggressive style. Wallace positions himself as the heir to the legacy. He claims the Netflix documentary released in 2019 helped vindicate his father by showing the political conspiracy angle. He argues that his father was a hero who was destroyed by corrupt elites. And thousands of people in Manaus believe him. They remember the free food baskets. They remember the puppet. They don't want to believe the horror stories. So we are left with a disturbing reality. The accused mastermind is dead. The star witness was murdered in prison. The surviving family members have been exonerated. And the TV show is back on the air.
The story of Wallace Souza is a masterclass in ambiguity. If you look at the police files, he was a gangster who used a TV station as a front. He was a man who turned human suffering into a commodity. But if you look at the streets of Manaus today, he is a martyr, a man who tried to fight a broken system and was crushed by it. The truth is likely somewhere in the bloody middle. It is undeniable that his show benefited from death. It is undeniable that he surrounded himself with killers. But whether he was the puppet master or just another player in a corrupt game is a question that may never be fully answered. It forces us to look at our own obsession with crime. We watch these shows. We click on the thumbnails. We drive the demand for this content. In a way, we are all part of the ratings machine. What do you think really happened in the jungle? Was Wallace Souza a monster created by the media, or was he a victim of a political hit job? Let me know your theory in the comments below. Because in this story, the only thing harder to find than justice is the truth.